Well, hello, everybody. We're here to talk about the 3A boys basketball season as we've kind of reached the midway point of the season. Most 3A teams have now played, roughly 13 to 16 games. And so it's a good time to kind of analyze and take a look at what's been going on with the basketball season up to this point and talk about where we're at at this point in the season and give you kind of a mid-season report. We've done so with both Class 1A and 2A, so you can go back and watch those in our archive, either on our website or on our YouTube page. So let's dive into the 3A right now. Again, we've been utilizing the poll, the rankings put out by Aaron Britton of Nesto Hoops for the purpose of this discussion. And in 3A basketball, of course, a lot of the teams are, well up north that we may not be familiar with, and likely you're not either. The top-ranked team in the latest Nesto Hoops poll that came out right after the holiday tournaments, which would have been before this past weekend's games, is Chicago DePaul Prep was ranked number 1, with Chicago Mount Carmel ranked number 2. Now, a lot of us are a little familiar with Chicago Mount Carmel, the Caravan, because they do come and play in this area somewhat and have come down and play in some tournaments and different things like that. Chicago Mount Carmel is 17-2 on the season. They have beaten East St. Louis by 33 points, so that's pretty impressive. It tells you a little bit about them. They have quality wins against Proviso East, Lyle Benet Academy. They've beaten Normal West. Their only two losses really have come to Missouri teams. They lost to St. Louis Vashon and also to Webster Grove, so really nobody in Illinois has beaten Chicago Mount Carmel yet, as they are 17-2 and ranked number 2 in that Nesto Hoops poll. Third-ranked team was Harvey Thornton at 13-2, and actually Harvey Thornton was in Highland at the shootout on Saturday. Some of you may have been at that game, and they played the fourth-ranked team, Metamora. So that was a great matchup between number 3 and number 4. Harvey Thornton comes in at 13-2. They beat Metamora by 1 point in that game yesterday. And, of course, when you're talking 3A basketball, particularly these teams up north, you're talking about teams that often have Division I players on their team, guys that have already committed to major universities, and such is the case with some of these. Harvey Thornton has lost to Homewood Flossmoor and also lost to Chicago Heights Bloom, but like I said, they beat Metamora in that shootout at Highland yesterday. Metamora ranked number 4 on the Nesto Hoops 3A boys poll. They are now 13-4 after that loss to Harvey Thornton yesterday. They have a quality win against O'Fallon and some other teams that we would be familiar with. So, again, they're something to be looked at and considered when you talk about 3A basketball is Metamora. You often think of Metamora for football, but they're pretty good at basketball this year. And then, when you talk about 3A basketball, the two teams that everybody around here has been talking about is the two undefeated teams, and that would be the Centralia Orphans at 17-0 and the Mount Zion Braves at 17-0. Centralia was ranked 5th in the latest Nesto Hoops poll, and Mount Zion 6th. And Centralia, of course, won the championship of their recent holiday tournament. They have wins there against Chicago Marist and Evanston. They also have wins this year against Mount Vernon and Bree Central, who is the second-ranked team in 2A. And Centralia has beaten everybody that's on their resume, everybody that's on their schedule so far. Maybe they don't play as tough a schedule as some of those other teams up north, but again, everybody they've played, they've beaten. The same can be said with Mount Zion. Mount Zion is 17-0, and they have quality wins against Champaign Centennial, who they've beaten twice. They've also beaten Lincoln. They've beaten Belleville-Altoff. They beat Olney by 28 points. And the closest game that Mount Zion's had this year has been 10 points, and that was the second time they played Centennial because they beat them by 27 the first time. So obviously Centralia and Mount Zion are both very, very talented teams, again, both unbeaten at this time. And some people are talking, well, hey, when would they play, in postseason? Is there any chance of them meeting up in regional or sectional? No. The only chance that Centralia and Mount Zion would ever play in postseason would be at the Super Sectional, and we'll get into that a little bit later on, as that Super Sectional would be at Springfield. But a lot of work would have to be done between now and then for both teams to get there. Upcoming, the Orphans this week will have a big test on the road at Mount Vernon on Friday night, and then they'll get into the Salem Invitational Tournament where they could see Mount Vernon again and obviously could also see East St. Louis in that Salem Invitational Tournament next week. The Orphans also have a game upcoming with Charleston as well. Mount Zion, on the other hand, they again, conference play and some other teams like that. Not a lot of high-profile games that they'll be playing outside of that, just kind of the normal schedule that they have coming up. So they may remain unbeaten for quite some time. The 8th-ranked team in Class 3A in the Nesto Hoops poll, they came out right after the holiday tournaments, is Morton. And Morton's got a pretty good resume. They are 17-2, and they have wins against East St. Louis, Metamora, and Champaign Centennial. So they've beaten 3 teams that are on the Nesto Hoops ranking. So pretty good team there, the Morton Potters. So keep an eye on them, ranked number 8. East St. Louis ranked number 10, coming in with a record of 9-6. Now, this is not the same East St. Louis Flyers team that we've often have seen over the past 4 or 5 years. I mean, there's no Terrence Hargrove on the team anymore, or anybody quite like that, but it's still a dangerous East St. Louis team. They do have quality wins against Moline. They beat Edwardsville, which is a good team. They beat Alton. They have lost to Collinsville and O'Fallon. They've got games upcoming here with Belleville East and Springfield Lanphier. And, of course, East St. Louis will be participating in that Salem Invitational, as I said. So they could potentially have a game upcoming with Mount Vernon, Centralia, or both in that Salem Invitational tournament. It just depends upon how that bracket and pairings work out, which should be released here pretty quickly. Let's see. Who else we got? Number 14 ranked team on the Nesto Hoops poll is Decatur MacArthur. We're somewhat familiar with them as well. Excuse me. MacArthur is 13-2 on the season. They got 5th place recently in that Collinsville tournament, which was loaded. MacArthur also has quality wins against Belleville-Altoff. They've beaten Eisenhower, beaten Normal West. They have a win against Sacred Heart Griffin, and they also beat Edwardsville. So Decatur MacArthur, definitely a very dangerous team as well at 13-2. And, there's somebody that you're going to have to watch too, ranked number 14th in that last poll and maybe moving up. Champaign Centennial ranked number 22 at 11-5. They've lost to Mount Zion twice. They also lost to Morton. But they do have quality wins against Effingham St. Anthony, Normal West, Bloomington, and some others. And number 24 on the Nesto Hoops poll was Mount Vernon. The Mount Vernon Rams at 13-5. They have a win against Mundelein Carmel at the Centralia tournament. They beat Teutopolis as well this year. They also beat Pinckneyville, beat Triad, beat Carbondale. They have lost to Centralia. They lost to Marist, and also lost to Evanston, and then over the weekend they ventured out to Evansville and took on Evansville Rights and lost that game. But again, you got to tip your hat to Coach Holloway for beefing up the schedule and getting out and playing some other teams and trying to get better as you go along. Again, the Rams will have 2 big tests this week. Actually, they are at home for both games, but they have the Centralia Orphans on Friday night, and they have the Heron Tigers on Saturday night. And then next week they'll jump into that Salem Invitational tournament that we alluded to earlier, where they could see either East St. Louis or Centralia, or possibly both of them, depending upon how that all shakes out. Some other boys 3A teams that we can kind of keep an eye on that aren't in the rankings, but still you should pay attention to because they could make some impact as the season goes along, and certainly when we get to postseason they can as well, and that would be the Olney Tigers. The Tigers have been on the poll before, but they fell off just due to a loss to Effingham St. Anthony, who's a 1A team. Now, St. Anthony's a pretty good team, but they're a 1A team. So when you're a 3A and you lose to a 1A, that kind of counts against you on the Nesto Hoops poll. They did win the Pinckneyville Holiday Tournament. They gave Benton their only loss of the year. Benton's a very good 2A team, and they beat them in the semifinals. That's the Rangers' only loss of the year. Olney also has wins against Teutopolis and Lawrenceville. They lost to Mount Zion in addition to Effingham St. Anthony, so that's their 2 losses that they have this year. One issue with Olney, of course, and it happens every year, is that the Tigers don't have a lot of 3A teams over in that neck of the woods to play because there just aren't very many 3A teams over there unless you play Effingham and Mattoon and Charleston and some of those teams, but those teams, just in the last year or so have not been real strong. So, they're just not able to play some of the 3A competition that would probably help them. So that may hurt them somewhat when you look at strength of schedule, certainly compared to some of these other teams. The same can be said with the Heron Tigers. The Tigers are 12-4, and they won the championship of the El Dorado Holiday Tournament. They beat Massac County, and they also have wins this year against Carbondale, Murfreesboro. They lost to Collinsville earlier in the year, who's on the rankings, of course, for 4A. They have a big test this Saturday as they'll come into Mount Vernon, and they might catch Mount Vernon at the right time because win or lose, Mount Vernon's probably going to be exhausted on Saturday after playing Centralia on Friday. So it may be good timing for the Tigers to come into Shagnaw Gym and take on Mount Vernon. We'll see how that goes. Two other teams that you might want to keep an eye on here in boys 3A basketball as the season rolls on, and then we get into postseason would be Lincoln. Lincoln is 11-5, and they got fourth place at that Collinsville Prairie Farms tournament. They have wins against Belleville East. They've beaten Chatham Glenwood. They beat Sacred Heart Griffin. So, again, Lincoln, a good basketball team as well. And then finally, another team I'll mention, throw out there, is the Triad Knights. You never know what you're going to get out of them. They're 10-6 on the season, but they can come up and bite you at any given time. They have wins this year against Belleville East, Carbondale, Columbia, just to name a few. They have lost to Mount Vernon. They lost to Decatur MacArthur, and they lost to Collinsville. But they're in just about every game that they play, and again, they've got the ability on a given night, to give you fits. So you got to watch out for them too. So that leads me to the discussion of potential postseason matchups. Okay, again, what we have so far is the assignments have been made, so we know where the sectionals are and the super sectionals and the regionals, but we don't know exactly where the teams are going to be in each regional and who exactly they're going to play. That will be released. The seedings will be on February 8th, I believe, and then the brackets on February 9th. But there are two sectionals that will feed into the Springfield Super Sectional. Those two sectionals will be at Triad and at Lincoln. And in that Triad sectional, you have two subsectional A and B. And in subsectional A and B, you have regionals at Charleston and at Marion. And along with Charleston and Marion in that subsection A, you have the following team. You have Centralia, Mount Vernon, Olney, Heron, Carbondale, Salem, and Mattoon. Again, don't know yet where the IHSA will put those teams at in which one of those two regionals, at Charleston or Marion. But if you were guessing, you would probably say that it would make sense for Olney, Mattoon, and Salem to go to Charleston, right? I mean, that would make sense. And it would also make sense for Heron, Mount Vernon, and Carbondale to go to Marion, right? That makes sense. So that leaves the odd team out, which is the Centralia Orphans. Where would they send them? Would they send Centralia to Marion, or would they send Centralia to Charleston? We don't know yet, but we'll find out in early February. But that's how that subsection A is set up there that would feed into the Triad sectional. Down in subsection B, there's two regionals there. One is at Freeburg, one is at Jerseyville. And along with Freeburg and Jerseyville in that subsection B, you've got East St. Louis, Mascoutah, Highland, Triad, Bethalto Civic Memorial, and Waterloo. So that's the lineup there, and you would think that East St. Louis and or Triad or Highland, probably have a decent chance of coming out of there. You can't discount Mascoutah either. So that's the way that's shaping up. So those subsection A's and B's will both feed into the Triad sectional, okay? And then the other sectional, as I mentioned, is the Lincoln sectional. And in the Lincoln sectional, you first of all have subsection A, where you have regionals at Chatham Glenwood and Springfield Lanphier. And in addition to Chatham Glenwood and Springfield Lanphier, you also have the following teams: Lincoln, Sacred Heart Griffin, Rochester, Taylorville, Springfield High, and Jacksonville. So, it looks like that Lincoln would probably have a pretty decent chance of coming out of there, no doubt. Possibly Chatham Glenwood. Just depends upon how they seed those up and bracket those up in the regionals. Now, subsectional B under that Lincoln sectional is a heck of a lot more competitive. It's going to feature regionals at Danville and at Decatur Eisenhower, and the teams that are in that subsectional B that feeds into the Lincoln sectional includes Mount Zion, Champaign Centennial, Champaign Central, Bloomington High, Mahomet Seymour, Rantoul, and Urbana, in addition to Decatur, Eisenhower, and Danville, where the regional sites are at. So the road for Mount Zion might be kind of tough. Again, they're still unbeaten, but they're going to have to beat some really good teams just to get out of that regional and into the sectional, because again, you got Champaign Centennial in there, Central, and Mahomet Seymour, and some other ones. So, again, that Lincoln Sectional and the Triad Sectional will feed into the Springfield Super Sectional in boys Class 3A. And so you wouldn't worry about any of those other teams that we talked about at the beginning of this this midseason report, like the Chicago Mount Carmels of the world or the Metamoras, the Harvey Thorntons, or any of those until, you got past all of that. So that's how boys Class 3A shapes up here at the midseason point. Hope you enjoyed this little discussion, and visit our website for scores regularly on AreaSports.net and be watching for live broadcasts along the way as well.